Hello, my name is Lo Sontag, and today is the fourth lesson of Civil Democracy and the U.S. Constitution. The first, we're actually going to be going over Articles 2, 3, 4, and 5. And you're like, wow, that's so many, but it's not going to be as long as Article 1. Article 1 talks about the legislature, and the legislature is essentially the people's shield, the Congress, House of Reps, Senate. That's the most powerful, and as I said, dangerous part of our government, of the Constitution, because that's you. That's a representation of you and me. The Constitution is a living weapon of the people. Or kind of like, your best friend that'll be mean to that new jerk at work. Yes, that is the Constitution. View it that way. Okay, yes, it's a little cheesy, but that's a good, analogy. I think about James Madison hunched over a parchment, that's paper, in Philadelphia, scribbling safeguards against tyranny, not just for his time, but for ours too. Because as we always talk about, the Constitution is living, breathing. The Articles 2, 3, and 4 are not relics or museum pieces. They are of a bygone era. They are blueprints for popular power designed to be wielded by engaged citizens. That's you. The founders feared unchecked power in all forms. The Constitution's genius lies in its checks and balances if we activate them. So let's go over some definitions. Checks and balances, principle of government under which separate branches are empowered to prevent actions by other branches and are included to share power. Judicial review. Judicial review allows the Supreme Court to take an active role in ensuring that other branches of government abide by the Constitution. Executive branch. This branch enforces the laws that the legislative branch, as Congress, makes. Did you hear that? The executive branch, this branch enforces the laws the legislative branch makes. And the judicial branch. The judicial branch includes the Supreme Court and other federal courts. It evaluates laws by interpreting the meaning of laws, by applying laws to individual cases, deciding if laws violate the Constitution. And the Electoral College. Electoral College is a process, not a place. I mean, you might know that, you might not. It's okay if you don't know. The founding framers, some people call it the founding fathers, but we like to call it the founding framers, established in the Constitution in part as a compromise between the election of the president by a vote in Congress and the election of the president by a popular vote. Impeachment. Impeachment, as adopted by the framers of the Constitution, this congressional power is a fundamental component of the system of checks and balances. Through the impeachment process, Congress changes and then tries an official of the federal government for treason, bribery, or high crimes and misdemeanors. Amicus brief. An amicus curiae is a person who isn't a party to a case. They assist an appellate court by offering additional relevant information or arguments the court may want to consider making before making their ruling. The phrase amicus curiae is Latin for friend of the court. Amicus briefs is shorthand for amicus curiae briefs, are legal briefs filed in appellate courts by amicus curiae. They are submitted essentially to show the court that its final decision will impact people other than the parties involved. Treason. Treason against the United States shall consist only in levying war against them or in adhering to the enemies, giving them aid and comfort. No person shall be convicted of treason unless on testimony of two witnesses to the same overt act or on confession in open court. So those are some definitions I should keep in mind, and I will be putting those references below. Okay, on to the Constitution, well, parts of it. Article 2, what you must understand is that the president is not a crown, it is a megaphone. Article 2, the executive branch, to summarize, establishes a presidency as a temporary public trust, not a monarchy, with powers checked by Congress and voters. The president enforces laws, commands the military, and negotiates treaties, but only through the Electoral College votes, originally meant to balance power, and with the ever-present threat of impeachment by the people's representatives. The executive, this is not hyperbole, is a servant, not a master. The executive branch is a servant of the people, not its master. Look at how the presidency works in comparison to monarchies, which we escaped from. The presidency, to let's quote Jefferson, is the office of the president is a great honor, but a greater responsibility. It's not a king, it's not a master. The Electoral College clearly has flaws, ex-election 2000, 2016, yet its original intent was to prevent demagogues by empowering informed delegates. Today, grassroots movements can pressure electors to reflect the popular vote because mirroring the spirit is often more important than mirroring the actual words of a constitution. Remember, because the Constitution is a breathing document. It's the people's ultimate check on the president. Nixon resigned owing to public pressure. Clinton's acquittal is owing to a partisan shield. And Trump's impeachment was activist momentum. I'm going to say this like I'm Tom Hartmann. Impeachment isn't a dusty relic. It's a fire alarm the people can pull when leaders betray their oath. And I think that that's happening right now. The executive branch is a bully pulpit and the people's power. FDR's New Deal responded to mass protests. Lyndon B. Johnson's Civil Rights Act followed Selma. Every tweet, or X, formerly known as Twitter, Reddit thread, discourse channel, protest, and vote shapes the president's agenda. The Oval Office is only as powerful as the voices outside its door. Don't forget that. What you did April 5th, that was some good work, good civil action. All right, Article 3, the courts, guardian of justices, not kings in robes. The judicial branch, Article 3 discusses the judicial branch. It created a Supreme Court and lower courts to interpret laws, but leaves their structure and jurisdiction to Congress, a deliberate loophole for public influence. Judges serve for life to resist political pressure, but we shape the judiciary by electing presidents, senators who appoint and confirm them, and juries retain the radical power to nullify unjust laws. Article 3 also defines treason. The judicial is another part of the people's shield in addition to Congress. Compare the Supreme Court with England's Star Chamber, and I will again quote one of our framers, a government of laws, not men. Here are some landmark cases. Brown versus the Board of Education in 1954, backed by decades of NAACP organizing. Orbfeld versus Hodges in 2015, built on decades of LGBTQ plus advocacy. The court doesn't lead. It follows the moral arc of the people, but only if we bend it. Remember, the court does not lead. It follows the moral arc of the people, but only if we bend it. Judges are chosen by people. Yes, they are indirectly. You're like, no, we don't. Yes, they are. This is why voting is so important. Presidents nominate them. Judges, senates confirm them. Both are accountable to voters. So you indirectly, when you pick people to be your senator, when you pick presidents, you are picking your judges. And I think that this will kind of really kind of clarify in people's minds, like, oh, I guess I should always vote in every single election. Yes, you should vote in every single election because you're deciding who's going to sit on those benches, who's going to interpret the laws. You're deciding that. One of my first memories of the court was Robert Bork. He was an awful, racist man, and activism blocked his judicial nomination in 1987. And with Biden, the public owing to the people, elected to Congress accelerated diverse appointees under Biden. So essentially, like, Biden elected a wide variety of of judges that came from a wide variety of life, who could have a great perspective on on the interpretation of the Constitution. Elections shape the bench. Votes, like your rights, depend on it, because they actually do. And also, let's discuss. Here's the thing: say, that it doesn't go your way, they pick an interesting judge. There's always the power of the jury. In democracy, that's the last line of defense, the jury. That's why you should do jury duty, even if you don't want to. The founders saw jury trials as a check on corrupt judges. Jury nullification can acquit protesters charged unjustly. 12 ordinary men can say no to tyranny, and that's power. And I'm so sorry, I should say 12 ordinary people can say no to tyranny. That is power. So moving on to treason and vigilance, these are the people's duties. Treason is narrowly defined to prevent political abuse, and it remains relevant as it has the potential to combat disinformation and defending elections. Treason isn't dissent, it's betrayal. And we, the people, we get to define it. Then finally, I'm going to also two more, but you'll understand why I'm saying this. There is Article 4, and it is the states as laboratories of liberation. Article 4, often entitled, like we call it, states' rights and unity. It binds states to respect each other's laws and citizens while empowering them as laboratories of democracy to test bold policies like marriage equality or voting reforms. It also guarantees federal protection against invasion and implicitly against state-level tyranny. Again, though, the people have to demand it. If you don't know this is what it's for, if you don't understand the Article 4, if you don't understand what the duties of these various branches are, then they can do what they want. Because if you're ignorant of what the Constitution says, then it doesn't really matter what is in there. That's why it's so important that you're taking this class, and why you should read a document that's actually like 15 pages long. And finally, Article 5. The People's Playbook that activates Articles 2, 3, and 4. Article 5 has to do with amendments, the Constitution's escape hatch, letting Americans rewrite rules with supermajorities, from abolishing slavery, the 13th Amendment, to securing women's suffrage, 19th Amendment, of course, it was white women. It proves no injustice is permanent if we organize. The founders didn't chain us to their era. They gave us crowbars to pry it open for a better future. And I think that was also Thomas Hartmann. Wish I could be so clever, but I think I took that from him. Remember that vote with a purpose when you do vote. 2020's record turnout shifted federal priorities, COVID relief, infrastructure. You're not just voting for a president, vote for the Congress. You're voting for a Congress that holds them accountable. Grassroots groups flipped Georgia's Senate seats by registering 800,000 new voters. That is amazing. And use social media to spotlight corruption, lobby electors, and petition state attorney generals. Support groups like the ACLU, the NAACP, the National Lawyers Guild, file amicus briefs, advocate for court reform, push lawmakers to prioritize judicial nominees who reflect our values, the people's values. The Constitution's enduring significance lies in its foundational premise as an instrument of popular sovereignty, crafted by the people, however narrowly defined people was in 1787 and perpetually reinterpreted for the people through jurisprudential evolution and democratic struggle, while its framers excluded excluded marginalized groups from their conception of citizenship. The document's structural elasticity, amplified by amendments, judicial reviews, and social movements, has enabled its expansion to affirm the full humanity of those who were once denied participation. To dismiss it as a relic of elite white male interest, as some critical theorists do, risk ceding its emancipatory power potential to that very hierarchy that it once codified. And we don't want to do that. Article 1's vesting of legislative primacy is a direct accountability. Congress underscores the framers' intent. The legislature, as the people's immediate proxy, remains the keystone branch charged with checking executive overreach, judicial inertia through its lawmaking and oversight powers. The presidency is far from a regal office. It operates as an administrative steward bound by constitutional constraints and electoral accountability, a role demanding not deference, but rigorous public scrutiny. To reclaim this framework is to recognize that the Constitution's democratic legitimacy hinges not on passive reverence, but on active, critical engagement by a pluralistic citizenry insistent on its promises. As Federalist Paper number 51 reminds us, a dependence on the people is no doubt the primary control on the government, a principle that endures only if we refuse to abandon the table. And me and my friends always have this conversation about the table. They're like, oh, leave the table when it's no longer serving you. We built the table, so you guys stay there. If you just walk away from the table and you build another table, they're going to be like, well, we'll just take that one too. Okay, so just keep that in mind. In conclusion, the Constitution is a verb. It is breathing. Reject cynicism. Our Constitution is protecting us. In Kansas, abortion rights were protected in 2022. The Montana Supreme Court in 2023 held that the state's constitution guaranteed a right to a stable climate system. Hawaii in June 2024 agreed to its first in-nation settlement with young people to take action to decarbonize its transportation system by 2045. Articles 2, 3, and 4, and 5 aren't just words. They are tools. They are weapons. Hamilton's quill, Madison's parchment, and your protest signs are part of the same story. Thank you for coming to class. This is Lo Sontag with Civil Democracy and the U.S. Constitution.